Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Leading Edge. I'm Kate Cacciatore. Before I introduce you to my guest today, here's some context about the purpose of this podcast series and some of the questions and themes it sets out to explore. As we face major global challenges such as the effects of climate change, biodiversity loss, and social inequalities, there is growing awareness today across all stakeholder groups that business, with its global clout, has to do more than incrementally improve its sustainability performance. We need wholesale systems change in order to be able to shift to a net positive, regenerative, inclusive economy and society. This will require unprecedented collaborative efforts of the private and public sectors, of civil society and citizens to find new business and consumption models, innovative products and services, as well as groundbreaking policies, financing mechanisms, and partnerships. This podcast invites business, sustainability, civil society, and public sector leaders to share their experience on the leading edge of the sustainability transition. What motivates them to act and innovate in this space? What is their vision and how are they working towards it? And what kind of mindset shift do they think will be necessary to bring about the changes we want to see in the world? Today, for this fifth episode of the podcast, it's my great pleasure to welcome Luwayo Biswick, co-founder of the Permaculture Paradise Institute, a social enterprise in Malawi that is leading one of the most exciting projects in the regenerative agriculture space, with the goal of creating 100,000 food forests by 2025. A small landlocked country in southeastern Africa with around 20 million inhabitants, Malawi's economy is heavily based on agriculture, which is dominated by monoculture, primarily the cultivation of maize using conventional farming practices and a heavy use of pesticides. In 2017, seeing the challenges faced by their country, Luwayo and his wife, Grace Davidson, decided to leave their jobs in the city and move to a rural village. They set out to create a model of regenerative agriculture that would empower local farmers and households, teaching them how to create food forests with multiple species of native trees, plants, and crops that would provide a plentiful source of healthy natural foods all year round. At the same time as countering poverty and malnutrition, the food forests were quickly seen to replenish the land and natural resources, transforming the arid deserts resulting from maize monoculture into lush forests that support biodiversity and contribute to mitigating climate change. So, Luwayo, welcome and thank you for being my guest on the podcast today. How are you doing this evening?
Very well. How are you, Kate?
Good. It's lovely to see you. Thank you for joining me after a long day out planting trees and being with the farmers, which is what you've been doing today.
Yeah, we are on a mission. So, yeah.
Right.
So it's natural for me.
Fantastic. Well, it's wonderful to get a chance to hear directly from you about this wonderful story. And I was really struck about it when I heard it for the first time, of you and Grace deciding to give up your jobs in the city and move to a village in the countryside and start doing something completely different. So it would be just great to hear about it from you directly. How did that happen? And what was it that sort of gave you this idea to set off on this adventure?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't easy at all. But after seeing the challenges that a lot of Malawians were facing in Malawi, and having gone through the same challenges ourselves, we thought it wise that we move out of town into the outskirts and be with the people to address the challenges that people were facing, because it were not making sense teaching people from the city about transitioning into a world of abundance in the rural world, whilst we're getting paid, we're working and the like, and people were like, but you're getting paid, and you're telling us we can address these challenges. So I personally was born into a family of 12, and it was so challenging for my parents to provide for all the necessary resources, basic needs that we needed as children. So as my wife grew up in an orphanage, So this brought us kind of like a sense of loving what we were doing, because we saw it was addressing the challenges that we used to face in the past, and there were the same challenges that people have been facing in Malawi. So we decided to quit job so that others could get a job, because job scarcity is a big problem in Malawi. There are a lot of postgraduates in Malawi who are seeking for jobs and they can't find any. So we wanted to create a gap and an opportunity for somebody out there to get an employment whilst we're going out into the outskirts to create employment. But before that, we would uh, create a life, self-sustaining life for ourselves, and surplus that would go to other people. So it wasn't easy at all. But then we did not have enough capital to start a new life, and it was in the village where we've never been before, a very different district outside the district, the city that we used to stay. So it wasn't easy at all by then. But we chose to do it the hard way, so that as we are teaching the farmers who are mostly marginalized by the government and other organizations, we wanted them to understand what we went through to be where we are, as an example and a model to them, that they can address the same challenges and also be able to grow their own food and earn a living and live a self-sustaining life.
That's amazing. What a big step to have taken, a very courageous one. And did you and Grace already have a background in permaculture, or did you have to learn everything from scratch?
No, by then we had actually, what drove me into permaculture was poverty. Because of poverty, I spent most of my time trying to seek for solutions for hunger and poverty. So was my wife. Of course, we got a job, but then we still wanted to do something that would satisfy um, our needs. So yeah.
So that was when the idea came up. And
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
right. So you went to live in this village, you lived there for a while to understand how everything worked. And before we get into the details of the food forests that you're now creating, how did you actually get started? I think starting from the beginning is the hardest thing, because you haven't got the momentum going yet. So how did you start getting the momentum going in your project?
So after I bumped into permaculture, this was the time I was still staying with my parents. So there was a family in the city where I was staying, and they were practicing permaculture. I saw what they were doing. I went back home and redesigned my parents' yard into a food forest. That was the first food forest I designed.
Wow.
As a learning classroom. So it was a living classroom for me before. This was before I went through any kind of training. And then I started borrowing books and doing a lot of research on permaculture and stuff. That's when I got an opportunity to go through the permaculture design certificate course, and then I got a scholarship to continue with my studies with Gaia University. Um, yeah. So after that, I got a job, and then I had this experience because my job was teaching about permaculture. So I was going about in Malawi, in different parts of Malawi, teaching permaculture in different districts, villages, and communities, and colleges, schools, and even across the globe. So I was going in different countries teaching permaculture. So I had this vast knowledge. And I met my wife at the institute where I was teaching. So she was my student by then, my student
Oh.
by then. And we got attracted to each other. And then, yeah, she also got trained. She went through the same training. And then she got certified in permaculture. So by the time we were coming into the outskirts, into the village to set up a permaculture institute, we had vast knowledge because we had already been teaching in different parts of Malawi and across in different parts of the world. So we have this vast knowledge, and I had been to Europe and other parts of the world. So I had vast knowledge and experience on the how people live and how they grow food and the like, and the challenges that people are facing in Africa and even in Europe, because when you're talking about climate change, it's a global challenge. When you're talking about hunger, it's a global challenge. So all these are global crises. Talk of food insecurity. It's not just in Africa. So I had this experience because I had been to these different countries. So by coming to this village to establish this Permaculture Institute, we were basing on the knowledge that we had and the anger that we had, the anger that a lot of people know how to do well, but they choose to do otherwise, including the politicians. So they know how to do well. They know all these solutions to address the problems that people are facing. So they know compost is the way to go, and they go fertilizer. They know if you give an animal to a person, the animals will be multiplying. A bag of fertilizer want. So they know these things, but they choose to do otherwise. So this is one of the reasons why my wife and I decided to relocate from the city and establish this Permaculture Institute. So we had this vast knowledge already, and that anger and the passion on the work that we were doing.
Yes, that's very tangible, and it comes through in what you've managed to achieve so far, which I think we can start delving into that in a little bit more detail. And I guess it would be a good first step to talk about the food forests. So what would you say is the definition? How would you describe a food forest to people who have never heard about the concept?
Yeah, so a food forest, it's to me, it simply means a regenerative garden, a garden which keeps on evolving with different plants, different strata, producing food year round. So it's not just a normal garden where you see a single crop which is harvested at a single time of the year. But to me, it's a garden, of course, a diverse garden, but it's regenerative over time and it keeps on evolving. So that's what it means to me.
Okay, and so the if you think about the food forests that you're currently creating with the farmers in Malawi, perhaps you could describe to us a little bit the kinds of trees and plants and crops, and how it works in practice. If a farmer is starting with some land which is fairly barren, what do you do, and how does the food forest get started?
Yeah, so people need to know this, that a food forest is always site specific, area specific, and climate specific. But it's regenerative and it's not static, and it keeps on evolving. So in this part of the world where we live in subtropic region, our type of food forest is kind of like different. And then if you go to another climate, the food forest will be different because you are kind of like adapting to the local situation, and you're designing the food forest to meet the needs of the people, but also designing around existing structures and climate and conditions and limitations and the like. But in our case, our limitation is that most of the farmers do not have access to enough land. And minimum on average, farmers would only have a hectare, 1 hectare. So having seen that, on a hectare, and the family, like for us, we were 12 in our family, a hectare would not be able to produce enough food to feed this large family. So our approach is a little bit different. We're not just talking about a barren land. Somebody would think of a barren field, but for us, we're starting with a homestead,
Right.
where people live. Because in Africa, specifically in Malawi, these are places which are swept bare. There's nothing that grows around the house. So everything is swept bare. So we are starting around that, minimizing swept bare ground by redesigning that landscape and homestead to create what we call an integrated homestead food forest.
Mm.
So trees are planted like passion fruits. Passion fruits are planted to provide shade for the family. So instead of the family staying indoors all the time, they've got gazebos outside created by these passion fruits. And you know, a single vine would produce up to 250 individual fruits.
Wow.
So, like, if you give a single passion fruit seedling to a farmer, the farmer will be able to harvest 250 individual fruits per year, per season, within the 3 month season. Then we plant papayas. Papayas do not take too much space, and moringa trees. Papayas are fruits, and avocados. And then the passion fruits, the farmers eat the leaves as well as the fruits.
I see.
Then bananas. Bananas are planted behind the shower room. So we're talking of a homestead, but trying to condense and maximize the use of every square meter, make it productive to provide for the needs of the farmer. So this becomes a food forest because we've got lemongrass around the house to strengthen the foundation of the house, control erosion, but also keep mosquitoes and snakes away. This lemongrass is used to make herbal tea. So
Right.
there are things like turmeric, ginger, taro, sweet potatoes, strawberries, gooseberries, and aloe vera. These are edible flowers, nasturtium edible flowers, which are planted around the house. So this creates a food forest which produces food in space and time. So we have the ground cover layer, the clamper layer, understory layer, shrub layer, and tall trees producing food. So that's a homestead food forest. Then we have woodlots and orchards where these farmers are able to hang beehives to facilitate pollination, and they get honey from there. And
Wow.
then in the orchard, that's where they get most of their fruits. And then in the woodlot, that's where they get most of their firewood, medicine, timber, and then building supplies. Then in rain-fed farmland, where farmers normally grow seasonal crops, this is where we create unique food forests by introducing agroforestry. Now, food forest, others would call agroforestry food forest, which is the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the same thing. So, but in our case, that food forest, that agroforestry system must be specific. So in these rain-fed systems, farmers plant maize, soybeans, cowpeas, pigeon peas, cassava, sweet potatoes, together with agroforestry trees like Glycidia and Lucina, and we have fish bean, as well as cover crops like mucuna and lablab. So these crops are planted together with seasonal crops to add biomass to the soil and protect the soil, provide maximum ground cover to the soil, but also fixes nutrients like nitrogen, So in this case, farmers are able to produce food from within around their homesteads in the orchard as well as in the rain-fed farmlands. Then in the wetlands, which in most of the cases, these are places which are spared for grazing. So in these grazing farmlands, we are also trying to help farmers redesign these wetlands to grow rice, irrigated winter maize, and vegetables, and agroforestry trees, sugarcane, bananas. So these are crops which are grown there. So if you take a little bit of what is harvested from within the household and a little bit what's harvested from the orchards and that of the rain-fed and the wetland, these provide enough food to the farmer instead of depending on a single field in a single season, which is overused, and over time it becomes it becomes like the farm itself becomes a victim of food production and then all these challenges. So we're like, no, if we integrate rather than segregate our systems, we will be able to produce food, and whatever is harvested from these small pieces we put together, a farmer will still be able to have enough food by the end of the day.
Wonderful. That really helps to visualize and I understand really why you call it the permaculture paradise. The word paradise springs to mind when you hear all these wonderful fruits and vegetables and legumes that the farmers, their families, and the communities can benefit from. Is there generally enough of a surplus to be able to sell some of this produce, or is it generally for the consumption of the farmer's family?
We have seen so much surplus. I gave an example of passion fruit. That was just a single passion fruit. But for example, on our farm, we've got 2,000 passion fruits. If you multiply 2,000 by 250, that's a lot of fruits. So there's surplus, because when you're talking about production in permaculture, you're not just talking about production of a single crop within a single season, but you're talking of multiple yields from multiple crops in multiple seasons. So there's always surplus, because when you're talking of fruits in the season, there are multiple fruits that comes in that season, more than enough for a family. A single mango tree, for example, gives us 1,500 kilograms of mangoes plus. That's plenty of mangoes.
That's
Nobody
really
can eat mangoes.
Yeah.
And then on top of guavas, Mexican apples, avocados. So there's surplus. And talking of surplus, we are building a market for the farmers so that we can connect the farmers to the market. So this will be a farmers market. And next to the farmers market, we will have an organic restaurant where people who do not have enough land, they'll be coming to buy organic produce or organic meals and food from this restaurant. And farmers will be able to bring their produce to the market and sell. So we are not just seeing the surplus, but we are also trying to build a market, because we've seen surplus produced from the farmers so that they can be selling. Yeah, and then in terms of surplus, it's not just surplus that we sell. We are donating, like the tree seedlings. We are donating these tree seedlings to farmers who are interested, but they're not registered farmers of our project, and schools who are interested and they're not part of our project, and organizations who are interested, but they're not part of our project and they're not our partners. So what we're doing, we are donating besides selling, because in permaculture, permaculture embraces a threefold sense of ethics. Care is number one. So we take care of the living and non-living things. And then people care central to the way we design, because it promotes self-reliance. We're trying to make sure that we are obtaining a yield from whatever we do. And then a sense of fair share is a third ethic that connects or binds the two ethics. So that's why we're sharing surplus of our food as well as surplus of the seedlings multiplied or propagated from our tree nurseries.
Yeah, that's great that you mentioned also the word organic, because there are no pesticides used in this approach, right? Everything is completely natural. Am I right?
Yeah, exactly. So we are surrounded by both small, medium, and large scale farmers who are so much obsessed with chemicals and fertilizer. And then to the point that the government can no longer manage to subsidize enough fertilizer. Even the subsidized fertilizer is way beyond the reach of poor Malawian in the rural area. And the process is itself, by the time a farmer is able to access the subsidized fertilizer, the maize is fully grown and they can no longer use that. So there are all these challenges that the farmer are facing. So looking at that, that's why we're going the organic way, the regenerative way, promoting organic methods, so that becomes an exit point for the farmers, for the poor farmers in the rural areas, because they have lots of crop and animal residues that can be composted and use that as organic fertilizer to grow food. Only that most of the farmers, the other thing that we came to realize is that if we continue using the word compost, the farmers won't get interested because there's no fertilizer there. For them, they would love if we are calling this compost organic fertilizer. Long as there's fertilizer, they are attracted. They're like, oh, there's an alternative to the fertilizer that we have been buying. There's another fertilizer there. But if you say compost, they're like, but you have to use a lot of compost on that piece of land. Whereas fertilizer, use a little bit of fertilizer. So there are these kind of issues.
Yeah.
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 So that's how we're
a
promoting the
good
organic.
example. Yes, and you mentioned, I think, about the natural fertilizer, because you're also increasingly integrating animals into the regenerative food forests, right? So what kinds of animals are you generally introducing? Is it small animals or larger animals to naturally fertilize the ground?
Because of funding, apparently what we do after training the farmers, we give them tools like wheelbarrows, shovels, and rakes as a starter pack. And we also give them a variety of seeds and seedlings because we have all of that. But then in terms of animals, we have to buy because we cannot manage to supply. Like right now, we're working with 3,400 farmers in 3 districts.
Right.
So we provide a pair of rabbits, a pair of chickens, and a pair of ducks. So rabbits, chickens, and ducks. These small animals are enough to provide or to produce enough manure for compost making, for a farmer to be able to grow food from within their homestead yard. But then when it comes to a larger scale, like the rain-fed farmland, this is where we are introducing agroforestry species like Grisidia lucina and fishbean and white thorn to help provide a base of fertilizer, a little bit of top dressing, but we're still working towards finding partners to be able to supply large animals like cattle, pigs, sheep, and goats, so that the farmers should be able to produce enough manure for compost making. But apparently, they're just using crop residues. Yeah.
But so yeah, I mean, as time goes on and the animals breed and you get more funding and sort of larger animals, one can imagine that you will be able to have a greater number of animals that will reproduce and be available for other farmers, I imagine.
Yeah, and this is the reason why we are pushing for animals, because if you give a bag of fertilizer to a farmer, that bag of fertilizer will only be used once. And next year, the farmer will need to buy another bag of fertilizer, but then the price will be double or 3 times. So if you give, let's say, a pair of rabbits to the farmer, after 1 year, the farmer should have maybe 10 times what they got from the project. You know, that's the difference. So in this case, the farmer will be able to have extra manure as time goes by, and then they should be able to grow enough food at a larger scale. So that's the idea. And you know, when you're talking of permaculture, agroecology, or regenerative farming, it takes a bit of patience. You know, it's a transitional process, and you know, when you're transitioning from one way of doing things to another way of doing things, you need patience because it takes a bit of time. It's not an overnight job, but we've seen within a single year farmers being able to address some of the challenges that they have been facing, but also be able to grow organic food from within small gardens as they are growing, you know, as they are mobilizing more resources to be able to grow food at a larger scale.
It's just wonderful to hear how it works in practice. And I think it would be really helpful also to understand the model that you're using to scale this up, because you have actually gone from zero to a lot of farmers. I think you mentioned 3,400 farmers trained. And obviously your goal is very ambitious. It's to reach 100,000 food forests, so 100,000 farmers who have been trained by 2025. So perhaps you could talk us through the formula for scaling this up, because I think you're using a train the trainers approach to incentivize and encourage the farmers to themselves train others to reach an ever-growing number of farmers in the region. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. So we are using the lead farm approach for now. And then after we are able to reach 100,000 farmers, we will start using the model village approach, because by then we will have lots of clusters of farmers working together, and these will become models to other villages and communities. So for the lead farm approach, this helps us to reach out to a lot of farmers within a short period of time. We train one farmer to train 9 more and formulate a farmer club of 10 farmers. So if we train, for example, one farmer to us, we have literally trained 10 farmers.
Brilliant.
So yeah, in this case, when we are talking about training 100,000 farmers, we are planning to train 30,000 farmers. So when we say 30,000 farmers, this translates to 3,000 lead farmers, and the rest are follower farmers. If each of the farmers are able to train 9 farmers and form a farmer club of 10. So the goal is to train 100,000 farmers by 2025. If we are able to train 30,000 farmers in a year, which translates to about 250 farmers in a month.
Wow, it's amazing. And
yeah, so if we do that, we should be able. Yeah, the goal sounds so ambitious, and people are like, how would you do that? So we, like in 2021, 2022 season alone, we've managed to train 3,400 farmers. So that's a clear indication that we should be able to reach our target if we find enough partners across the nation, because we're not just talking about training 100,000 farmers in central Malawi, but we're talking about training 100,000 farmers across Malawi, so that these become our satellites, and they become kind of like hubs in miniature, and these hubs will start creating their own satellites and multiplying. So if we have got partners across Malawi and then farmers across Malawi, these farmers will start multiplying. And then by the end of maybe 2060, we should be able to have a permaculture nation.
I love that.
Permaculture, we don't need to go around train farmers, because the farmers will be training themselves, they'll be training other farmers. So that's the idea. And we are focusing on building leaders who can build other leaders, because we cannot manage on our own to train all these farmers. But if we train farmers and they go and train others, that's how we're going to manage to reach our goal. But then when all these farmers are well trained and they've formulated these clubs, they'll have villages, permaculture villages, of which others would call ecological villages. Now these villages, because they are designed the same way, they do the same things, they are doing their farming the same way, they'll become model villages. We can't call a model village, we can't call it a model village when only 2 individuals out of 100 are practicing permaculture. So that's not a model village. No. Just model farmers, But then when the whole village becomes a permaculture village, that will become a model village to us, because we have seen all these model village where you only find 2 farmers practicing what's being advocated for. So we're like, it's not a model village. We only have model individuals, you know. But if model individuals multiply, we will have a village doing the same things, like a village of like-minded people. That will become a model village to us. So the model village approach will follow the lead farm approach if we are successful in our approach.
Yeah, I can see how that will be a critical point for the scaling up process. And I wonder, what would you say is the secret ingredient here? Because I know there are many different ones. Some of them are technical, some of them are human. But have you managed to generate this momentum through the vision that you've been able to share? And how easy has it been to encourage people to participate and to really get it? Like, does every farmer immediately say, yes, sure, I'm going to help train 9? others, or is it hard sometimes to convince them? What is it that makes the difference and helps it to become more of a movement than just an isolated activity?
Our story shocks everyone. So when we share our story, they're like, okay, so you've been through what we're going through right now. You have seen what we're seeing right now. Oh, you went to bed on an empty stomach at some point, but you have all these foods, So they're like, okay, so if you managed to get out of such predicaments and you have this paradise where people can come and harvest at any time of the year, we can also manage to do this. That personal story, it's
Yes.
a living testimony that everyone can do it. And then the other thing is okay, we were poor before, but now we have a lot of food, we have a lot of things. People are like, okay, so you are our role models. We can also become like you are. We can have all these things. So those are kind of things that have been attracting a lot of people to start doing what we are doing. Not just farmers, but we've seen a lot of people trying to quit job because they have seen that you can take your passion personally and professionally and becomes your way of life. Because as people, we were born with different talents, but sometimes because of education and whatever, we get diverted from our own passion, our own talents, and we focus on something different. So because of that, a lot of people have seen that it is possible, and if they managed, we can also manage. And the other thing is that because we share the story and we are the ones teaching,
Yeah.
we don't bring somebody else from elsewhere. So I think that kind of thing, they're like, okay, we are learning Malawian way of farming from Malawians.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing. So we have seen a lot of people coming on their own instead of us going chasing for who is interested. And then we're like, okay, we are not conducting trainings. Apparently, you wait in due course when we have a course coming. So that's the most surprising thing. And talking of the composting toilets, for example, we also build composting toilets for farmers who are interested, because they do not have enough animals, but they are interested to be producing a lot of manure.
Yeah.
So the government, for example, and many other organizations have tried, and they have built lots of these composting toilets across Malawi, but they are not used because these composting toilets were built by somebody who doesn't have one. So like, you have no composting toilet. You are advising me to build a composting toilet and they don't use it. And people wonder why these people are not interested, because you are personally not interested. The trainer is not interested in using compost toilet. So that's why these farmers are also not interested. So when they come here, they see we use composting toilets, like, okay, we can also have composting toilets. So last year we managed to build 100 composting toilets to 100 farmers. And this year we are also planning, we've got some planning, and we're also planning to build 100 composting toilets to 100 farmers. So we'll have 200 composting toilets to 200 farmers. And these will help us to create 200 food forests. So those are kind of like the secrets behind our success, because we challenge people. If you don't believe us, you will still gonna go to bed on an empty stomach as we are harvesting food every day. They're like, oh yeah, you're right.
That's very tangible. Yeah.
Exactly,
That's something that you can get your mind around, isn't it? Yeah.
and they see all these passion fruits dropping to the ground. They're like, you have all the food dropping to the ground. They're like, because we planted. You can also have this if you planted. So like, yeah, if we planted, passion fruits would be harvesting. We would be harvesting passion fruits. So those are kind of secrets why people are so much interested, because they can see a living example.
Yeah, that's great. And I think also from what I've heard you say, I suspect that the experience of the community is part of this as well, right? In a way, because the fact that the farmer trains other farmers and they become a club, and that people are doing this together for themselves and their community. Would you say that that plays a key role in sort of developing the community spirit?
Yeah, it does. That's another secret. When other farmers see their fellow farmers doing likewise, being able to grow food, you know, they're like, okay, we also need training, and we also like to join the project because we would like to be harvesting food like how our farmers are doing. So that's also key. And then when farmers are working together, that promotes love, that promotes togetherness, that promotes unity, and that promotes interdependency on each other. Because one would be very creative on making compost or whatever, and somebody would be very good at planting things. So when they're working together as a club or group, they support each other when someone cannot. So these farmers act as helping hands to other farmers. So that's also a beauty of working together in a club as farmers.
It's really wonderful. Kind of, it's a model not just for other farmers in Malawi, but for people everywhere in the world, I think, who are looking to create new communities, new ways of working, new ways of being in an economy and a society that makes sense for everyone.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, exactly.
And so if we talk about I don't really like this term in this context, but the business model, the way that this is being financed. Today, how's it working? Are you mainly depending on funding to be able to do the bulk of what you do? Is there scope for it to become self-sustaining over time? How do you see that?
So we haven't been getting funding from people up until when we started working with farmers. Because we always wanted to be able to grow our own food and be able to feed our family and be able to, So when the interest came on how to start outreach programs and with support with farmers, a lot of implications also came. So there were implications like transport, fuel, and mobility issues to reach out to farmers. Some farmers are like 200 miles away. Some farmers are 400 miles away. Some farmers are 20 miles away. Some farmers are 5 miles away. So for me to be able to reach to this farmer who is like 500 kilometers from us, I cannot walk. So these are kind of things that brought in the issue to do with funding. So that's where we needed partners to come in and donors and funders to come in to support, let's say, the training. Because for me to train other farmers, that's possible. But then to train 100 farmers, I need to replenish that energy, and then I need to be compensated for the time, because this would be the time I'll be in my garden, planting things. So those are kind of things that brought in or attracted some partners to come in and start bringing in funding and the like. So you'd see whatever funding we get, we post, what we did with that funding. If we bought a motorbike, you'll see the motorbikes. If we did the training, you see the training, and then not just a single picture of a single day, but an update of the training, so you can follow the training. If it's a 5-day training, you see post for 5 days, all these things. So, in terms of being self-sustained, in terms of food, we don't have any problem. For us, we don't have any problem. But then when it comes to reaching out to farmers, that's when we need funding. But then there'll be a time where we'll be independent, because this is what we do. After training farmers, and they have formed the Farmer Club of 10, some of the farmers there are also identified to become community facilitators.
Right.
So these community facilitators are provided with motorbikes and smartphones, and they become not just community facilitators, they're also extension officers to us, permaculture officers, not government extension officers.
Mm-hmm.
So they are the ones who are there all the time, and then they continue training other farmers. So in terms of sustainability and multiplication of the farmers over time, when the project phases out, we have these people who are community facilitators, and they are provided with resources, and they can continue multiplying the farmers or training other farmers, training more farmers. So we believe at some point that we'll move from one region to the other to say, okay, this region is independent. They no longer need our support. But in terms of, because when you're talking of sustainability, being self-sustained, you need to look at all angles, not just financially, but you're also looking at the system itself that you are implementing, or the project that you're implementing. So if you look at the plants, the crops themselves that we are promoting food forests because, like I said, it's regenerative. It's not a static system. It is an evolving system. It keeps on evolving, So because of that, you plant the passion fruit today, you come 5 years later, you will still find passion fruits and even more. You plant a single lemongrass today, you come 10 years later, you have plenty of lemongrass. So in terms of sustainability, we're not just looking at the donors, we're not just looking at funding, we're also looking at the project itself, being able to sustain itself, and the farmers themselves. So you can classify sustainability in a couple of thematic areas and then work around that and see on the extension part, what are strategies in place to make sure that the extension is self-sustained. And then on the production side, are the farmers planting, let's say, seasonal crops or perennial crops, which continue to produce food? And then you look at the clubs themselves. Are the farmers well organized? Are the structures in place? And then policies and bylaws, guiding and governing local boards and the like, so that the farmers can continue to work on their own without support from us. So you're looking at all these angles.
So it goes well beyond just the permaculture itself. It's, as you said before, it's like a model of community and a way of governing and determining how things work. Yeah.
So it's beyond food production. You're talking of, permaculture is beyond food production. It's you talk of food production, talk of human settlements, community governance, and the like. So, permaculture looks at all these things, not just food production. So permaculture is beyond agriculture. So it's more of a design science, and it is only designed to meet specific needs. And it depends on what you're designing.
Yes, exactly. And I think what's interesting also about the project and very inspiring is that it's not just happening, you're running it within Malawi, but the influence that you're having is global, if I understand correctly, because on the one hand, you're part of the agriculture regeneration communities, the ARC initiative, which is something that it's an activity that covers many different countries and lots of cross-fertilization of ideas going on there. But you also have universities and research institutes coming to study what you're doing to understand how are you making such a success of this and what lessons can be learned and applied in other places. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about this global reach and global influence that you're now managing to have.
Well, in permaculture, the most interesting thing is that there's a principle which says think globally but act locally. So like whatever we do, we have a big vision. It's like a global vision, but we are doing it at a local level to influence or attract global attention, So the thing is, we are not just thinking about growing and upscaling these techniques and whatever we're doing in Malawi, but we would like to influence global so this is the reason why you see that the way we do our things and then the way we advocate for our work, it attracts a lot of people from all sorts of cultures and the like. And then when they come here, they find relevant lessons applicable to their culture, relevant lessons applicable to their environment and climate and the like. That's the most important thing. And we are able to use local resources, local demonstration to impact the world.
Amazing. It's just great to think we have things that we can share and that we have in common, and we still have to adapt them, but the fundamentals are there wherever you go.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the reason why I can go, like when I go out to teach, I don't just go out to teach, I also go out to learn. Because for example, if I'm teaching a different culture, I need to understand the culture. I need to understand, the way how people live, how they farm, whatever. So there's a lot that I learn as there's a lot that I teach. So we live in this world that we've got so much to learn as we've got so much to teach. There's nobody who was born to have everything, who knows everything, was born to know everything, has got everything he needs or she needs. We have something that we need from others. So we believe there's nobody who was born to have it all and can't need anything from anyone, as there's nobody who was born without nothing. Everyone was born with something. We can all share something. We need others. So that's what we believe.
It's a very powerful and inspiring philosophy to share. And I guess we've already had a sense of the vision that you have, which is a big one. Is there anything else that you would add, something that you're hoping to bring about in the future, or anything that you would like to share with others out there who are wondering, how could I do this? I'm trying to do it. I would like to do it. What would you say to them?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of people. I would start with our own government in Malawi. One thing that we would like to see, our policies supporting regenerative systems, our policies supporting agriculture. Well, we may have our policies, but we also need to implement it. So implementation becomes a problem. So I would love to see our own government pushing for regenerative systems, because we have seen a huge number of Malawians suffering because of our own poor decisions and poor policies. So these poor policies are affecting a lot of Malawians, and the victims of poor policies are not politicians. They are those people, smallholder farmers in the rural areas. But then those in custody of the policies, those who are not affected by the policies. So that's number one. And then I would also love to see, those people who are promoting these regenerative systems or agriculture, permaculture, whatever. Well, number one, to document a lot. Number two, to practice, because there are a lot of studies. There are a lot of studies in Malawi used across the globe, but then there are few demonstrations of those studies. So I would love to see all the studies accompanied by practical examples of the studies.
Right.
We don't need too much papers which will never address the challenges that we're facing. But if we had practical studies in the fields showing what's written in those studies and thesis, whatever, we wouldn't have had a lot of people going to bed on an empty stomach, because they could easily be harvesting papayas. You can have all these figures, in books, whatever, in studies, but nobody will eat the figures. Nobody. This is the reason why we've got lots of professors in Malawi with few farms, and we've got lots of graduates in Malawi graduating from these different agriculture universities, very few farms, because everyone is searching to become a politician, or everyone is searching for a job. So I would love to see these practical examples of practical farms farms established by graduates, farms established by professors, in Malawi. Before we talk of farmers, farmers are doing their part. Unfortunately, they're just the victims of everything, all these challenges. They're victims of climate change. They're victims of hunger. They're victims of inflation. They're victims of all these things. But if we join hands together, then I think we can address, because there are a lot of people who talk a lot about agriculture, regenerative agriculture, and the like. They have nowhere to show. They can't show you, but they have lots of studies to show you. But they have no farms where they can show. So I would love to see them, because these farmers, most of the farmers we work with, their literacy levels are very low. So these are farmers who are visual learners. They learn by seeing things, what's happening there. So this is the reason why we're pushing for more Permaculture Paradise Institutes across Malawi, so that the farmers out there, they can see what's happening, and then they can take those lessons and apply them in their lives. For the farmers, nothing special than being smart and working hard, because this is a layer type of information that they can't find it elsewhere. So it's just a matter of encouraging the farmers to work hard and be patient, because there are things that won't show results today or tomorrow, but they'll surely do show results. And I would just encourage people that it is possible to take permaculture and agriculture, personal and professional, as a full-time job. And it is possible. We can grow food. You've seen it. We grow our own food here. We've seen it, and we do not need to worry much about the prices of fertilizer or the prices of inputs, because we've seen that we can move away from that way of farming into more of a regenerative farming. And I would like to give shout out to agroforestry regeneration communities for the support. We have United Methodist Church of Resurrection. They also give support, because we are also working in partnership with them in one district. And Autumn Climate Action, it's a UK-based organization. They support Malawian youths to come and take a 6-month training course here on the farm. So they're also playing a role. And also would like to give shout out to all the universities, both in diaspora and in Malawi. They invest a lot in sending their students to our institute. There are a lot of other institutes that they could be sending their students back, by identifying and acknowledging that what we're doing is having a lot of great impact in the academic world. I think for us it's a plus. So all the local universities who bring their students here, and then those universities in diaspora, I would like to give them a shout out as well. And then, and my wife as well, for being a good partner in this project, because we've achieved a lot. We have achieved a lot. So, and there's a lot that we're going to achieve. So, I would like to give them a shout out.
Yeah, I mean, I can't thank you enough for joining me and joining us today, because I think there are going to be a lot of people who, when they discover what you're doing, will be it lifts your spirits, and it shows that it is possible, and it gives a clear pathway forward. So thank you so much for what you're doing, and I'll be watching and learning from how it goes from here, and hoping that your vision becomes a reality in every way.
I would like to thank you so much, because without you, our work can't be where it is right now. Because people like you taking this information and sharing with the world in a way that we cannot manage on our own. So we can't thank you enough. You cannot support our project with money, but by doing this podcast, you are making a very huge contribution toward this project. And we can't thank you enough. This is a great contribution.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure to learn about everything that you're doing, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again and find out how it's going in a while.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Luwayo, and have a great evening with your family.
Thank you. Thank you.